Good afternoon, class. For this week's discussion, I was assigned the topic of fire and explosive evidence in the crime scenes. So, beginning with fire, fire is produced by a process called combustion. This is a type of oxidation that occurs when a substance reacts with the oxygen around it and produces energy in the form of heat and light. In order for a fire to keep burning, three conditions must be present: fuel, oxygen, and heat, otherwise known as the fire triangle. If one of these is removed, the fire will be extinguished. For example, carbon dioxide fire extinguishers remove the oxygen element and thus extinguishes the fires. Water-based fire extinguishers, for example, will remove the heat from the triangle and extinguishing the fire in that way. So the goals for fire scene investigation are to determine the point of origin and the cause of the fire. In some of them, the the evidence might be scarce because of the damage that was caused to the scene. Um, in the forensic side of the investigation, this entails examining the ignition devices and the debris for flammable liquid residue. Historically, certain patterns in the scene were examined, just and they were admitted as evidence. However, scientific research in this field uh, concluded that some of these patterns were not as accurate as they seem to be. For example, crazed glass, concrete spalling, and depth in char in the wood. Regardless of this, patterns are still used to this day. For example, the classic inverted V can indicate a point of origin, and the melted plastic or glass can provide the idea of how hot the fire was burning. Some of the tools and packaging when recovering fire evidence. Uh, so most of the evidence gathered from a fire is based on hydrocarbon, which is a chemical compound present in accelerants. Chemical sniffers in the early ages had issues by producing a lot of false positives. Newer models are called electronic noses, but they have to be calibrated and maintained regularly, or else the evidence might be compromised in the case. There are dogs specifically trained for arson cases where they can detect small traces of hydrocarbon uh, as little as zero point 0.1 milliliters of accelerant. The best way to package fire scene evidence is in a clean metal paint can because it is airtight and prevents the evaporation of molecules. In contrast, plastic bags can be porous to hydrocarbon molecules where they will simply disappear in the air. Mm, Arson cases are some of the cases most difficult to prove beyond reasonable doubt because the evidence is so small that it might leave up to interpretation if there was some background residue or if the fire was started by someone. Explosives. So the main difference between fire and explosives is the combustion rate. Unlike fire, where the gas can dissipate in a relatively harmless manner, explosives, because they're contained in a specific container, the pressure builds up, and wherever the container fractures, this is where all the pressure will release, and releasing a lot of energy with it. Um, Explosives usually occur in a specific manner. An initiator charge gives enough energy to start the combustion of either a primer or initiating device. There are two different types of explosion. There's a diffuse explosion, which is when flammable gas and air combust in a large area instead of being concentrated. This is common in house fires by natural gas and cases such as those. Concentrated explosions is when a device is usually in place. It leaves a larger area because all of the energy is concentrated in a specific spot. So evidence and tools, just like fire investigations, explosions pose a similar challenge to investigators, mainly because the damage around the surrounding area and to the evidence can be scarce. Metal paint cans can be used as well, but you can also use glass and plastic vials. Uh, the main point of this is to keep all the explosive residue, and in some cases, unburned explosive can lodge itself into items around the area where the explosive detonated, and this can be used as evidence. Just like on fire, uh, there are dogs specifically trained specifically to identify explosive and its components, mainly because certain components in explosives have specific scent that they can detect. There are also new handheld devices that can detect fragments of compounds of explosives, and the items where these fragments are located, they can be packaged and get sent to analyzed. That is all for this week's discussion. Thank you.